Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. And I'm also thrilled to be introducing to you a great guest, Mr. Jamie Hilboldt. Now, Jamie is the go-to keyboard player of more than 14 years standing with Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. And as you'll hear as we talk during the show, that alone is a challenging role with lots of orchestration from a keyboard viewpoint. But as you'll also hear, Jamie does so much more than that and also has some wonderful insights into working with iconic acts, as we discussed, that sadly may not be here in another 10 to 20 years. And you know, the legacy that they are going to leave is enormous, but also his work in musicals and with show bands and cover bands and everything else in between. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy this a great deal, and I'll talk to you at the end of the show. Jamie, so wonderful to have you here. And I think you're only the second guest ever across 104 episodes that has pretty much come straight home from a gig and jumped on for a chat. So I can't thank you enough.
My pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, so what was your gig tonight? Where were you playing, and was it a good gig?
Yeah, it was fun. It was sort of a sing-along thing at a place called the Far Out Lounge. And it was only 2 hours long, and it was some great players, and it was great fun, yeah.
That's excellent. Now, we're definitely going to talk about the range of things you get up to, but I thought we'd start with our more traditional question of your musical upbringing. So, Jamie, what got you into music in the first place as a child? Who were your inspirations, and what, developed the passion for you?
I grew up in upstate New York, and we had, at the time, the Young Rascals and the Vanilla Fudge. And, of course, the Beatles were an influence on everybody in the 60s and 70s. But with me, it was actually Felix Calveri from the Rascals, who Hammond B3, that was just this incredible sound. And Mark Stein from the Fudge was just, it was just really exciting at the time. And I've luckily got to work with Felix a few times. We've done a bunch of gigs with those guys, and I've never met Mark Stein, but got to at least work with Felix, and he's just a sweetheart of a guy. Just considering how many hits the Rascals had, he's just totally down to earth. And in fact, we're doing another cruise with him in March. We'll be on the Flower Power cruise, and him and Gene Cornish will be on that. So. Yeah, that's how I got started. It was just, as everybody, I played a little guitar, played guitar at the time, and then as soon as I heard the Hammond organ, that was it.
And so when did you first lay your hands on one, Jamie? I'm sure it wasn't as a child, unless you were very, very lucky. Sort of, did you have lessons initially, or just worked your way into it?
I'm pretty much self-taught. I of course, had some lessons when I hit college, but I was... I had a Vox Jaguar, which was, the reverse colored keys and everything. And I sort of learned on that, and in a Rhodes electric piano, I had that. It was way before Hammond at that time. I finally got an M3, I think, when I was a senior in high school. I think I got an M3. Which was the spin it version of the B3, and had a little Leslie. I don't think I had a 122. I think it was the shorter one. I can't remember what it was, but 145 was what it was called. But yeah.
And so, what do you recall of those high school years, Jamie? So, what was your first band, and what did you learn from those formative experiences? Because we've all been through them, and they usually are quite formative.
Yeah, I did the high school dances like everybody, and we had block dances at the time in New York. You could, especially during the summer, they would have these fun things where they'd get hundreds of kids together, and this was back when you had a Shure PA. You were like pretty cool at the time, and so they we had a really good upbringing, and then the great thing was, I was from upstate New York, not the city, but up more towards Canada. But the musicians in our area were really good as far as passing knowledge on. You could say, how do you do that? And now everybody has YouTube, so you could just pull up a tutorial on any song you want, and I always say every mistake I've ever made is on YouTube. You can pull up hundreds of videos of me just messing up. Growing up at that time was that people pass knowledge on, which I think they still do, but there's so much knowledge and so much music and stuff. It's really hard to just, when I grew up, you bought an album like you would buy the collections album of the Rascals, and you'd play that for weeks, and you'd learn those songs, literally learn them. And now, there's so much music out there. I don't know how you would circle in on just one song or one style and stuff. But it was a good way to upbringing. My brother's a musician; he's a bass player, so we just had always played music, and there was no other musicians in our family, just us. So.
No, that's great. And I mean, you can't beat a good high school dance or something as a formative thing. So what got you? You mentioned college. So was music a focus for you in college or something else?
No, music ed was, yeah. Wasn't a good enough reader to become a performance major. I unfortunately, being self-taught, really hadn't grasped how to read music that well at that time, which is really important. Everybody, all younger musicians who I talk to, I always stress you want to learn to read, because there's so many more opportunities. You can do. I'm lucky. I do musicals. I do church gigs, theater gigs, all kinds of stuff. And you have to maybe not sight read, but you have to be able to read. Somewhat. Honed that skill better then, and since then I still work on it. I still work on reading all the time. I'm lucky that I have gotten as far as I have. I've had a really great career, and I think part of it is you just keep going. You just keep trying.
Really, it's a really important point to keep going. And I mean, obviously doing the music ed. What was your first gig after college where you thought, okay, I can make a living out of this? Now, I'm assuming there was some teaching involved from the outset, but yeah, what was sort of your move into an actual career in music after college?
Well, in the 70s and 80s, there was tours of show bands, they were called, and you would literally tour. Oh, just Holiday Inns, whatever, the whole hotel circuit. But you'd go out. I mean, there was times I'd be out for a year, and not make it home. You would just, one thing we got to do at that time, which I don't think guys get to do now, is we played 6 nights a week.
Yeah. So
you play 4 hours, 6 nights a week, you're going to get pretty good, or you're going to find something else to do, So we were very lucky in that aspect, and different band, you would be in a band for a while, and then you'd run into another band on the road, and they would need a keyboard player, and you just go work with them for a year, or whatever, and made some great friendships that I still have today. You learned a lot doing it basically 4 hours a night,
Yeah, which is incredible. Now, I mean, thinking of that as 24 hours of actual live playing a week, one question I've always wanted to ask but never had is, psychologically, how do you maintain both an equilibrium working that often, but also just maintain motivation? I'm sure you're not motivated 24 hours a week playing, but just, what's your approach to keeping things together over that sort of heavy workload?
A lot of it is finding musicians that you communicate with on stage, that you enjoy playing with. And I mean, this, when you're with especially a rhythm section, if you're with a rhythm section that is in sync, it's amazing. It's like you're not thinking about what you're doing. You hear things, you react to what you hear, you play something that they react to. It's an amazing feeling. And you can hone your skills just playing. I mean, if people say, how much do you practice? I say, well, I just played. I played every night. That was my practice. But
no, absolutely, and it's an incredible forced discipline, I suppose. In the reality is 4 hours a night. And down here, Jamie, and I know you've extensively travelled through Australia a number of times. As you know, it's more the travel as much as the playing. But down here, bands did the same. They do 6 nights a week, sometimes 2 gigs a night, but with massive travel in between. It's a hell of a discipline.
Yeah, and traveling in Australia is, Sydney to Perth. That's a haul.
Yes,
That was the first time we played Australia. I tell this story to everybody. We were in Sydney. I think we played the Gold Coast, which is near there or something. And I went to the Natural History Museum in Sydney and saw the 10 things that can kill you in Australia. And I basically never left the hotel after that. There's like spiders and snakes and all kinds of fun things in Australia.
There is. Yeah, so no, you're right though. But I think your central point around the doing it constantly. So I mean, you're doing that in show bands. You're really developing your chops. What, in your mind, was your first gig or band where you thought, okay, I've stepped up to a further level again here, where this is getting even more serious?
I played with when I got to Austin. I got to Austin in '84. And Austin at the time was just an amazing place to be for musicians. I don't know if you've ever been to Austin, Texas, but, basically we played, and Stevie Ray Vaughan's playing across the street, and Tim Buck Three's playing down at the corner, and Christopher Cross is playing over here. And that was Austin back then. It was just amazing. And so when I got here, my brother and I both moved here at the same time. You have to get to that level, or else you're not working, And literally, you sit down and you go to a few jam sessions and you sit in with some people and you go, oh, I have to play at this level if I want to live in this town, So you do you get there eventually, I was with a show band. I guess you would call it a show band at the time. They did a lot of Motown things and stuff like that. But we ended up playing the White House twice. And at that point, I started thinking, oh, I'm getting pretty good at this. And then I was doing a musical. I was doing the musical Beehive. And after the show, in the musical, there wasn't a big band. It was basically a 4-piece band. So as the keyboard player, I'm doing all the horns, all the strings, harps, everything, oboes, all this stuff in there, which I really enjoy doing because I've always thought more as a orchestra than I do as a piano. I've always thought this sound and this needs to come in here. This would work here. And so I was doing the show, and this guy came up to me after the show, and he goes, was that recordings? And I said, no, we were playing it all live. And he said, look, I'm doing a show in Vegas with this Vegas show called Legends in Concert, which is at the time they were impersonators, but these are like really good impersonators. This is like a Tina Turner and Madonna and whatever. And also a Garth Brooks so I did these shows overseas for a while. I did went to Japan with them, Singapore, different places, and eventually became musical director for some of the shows. But it was really, really good to get out and just experience different kinds of music, because you'd go out with a Madonna for a few weeks, and then next you're playing with a Garth Brooks impersonator. So you learn a whole different aspect of music, each time you do this. But I remember the first time I went to Japan, and I was well aware that Japan had phenomenal musicians, phenomenal pianists and stuff. And so you think somebody's willing to pay me to go there to play, and all of a sudden you think, yeah, maybe I'm getting pretty good at this, if they want to send me there to do that. And while we were there, first time we went there, we went to Tokyo, and on our night off. And it was just I think it was just the rhythm section from the show. But we went to this little club that was really held maybe 50 people. It was tiny. But we went to the club, and once they found out we were Americans, they immediately got us on stage. And all these guys wanted to sit in with us and stuff. Sweet people, great players. I mean, just, monster players. And it was really, really exciting, really fun. And then from there, I have just been so lucky to get to be in places where I have gotten great gigs. I've been with Gary for 14 years now, and I went to Nashville to audition for that gig. Auditioned against a bunch of guys in Nashville, but I was lucky. The thing that I do, orchestrating and doing all that, they needed somebody who sang high and did that, and I got the gig.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Jamie, because that's what stands out. And let's move to Gary now. So, obviously, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, iconic band, iconic singer, with some amazing songs. And I obviously, as part of the prep for this show, Jamie, I've looked at some of the work over the past couple of years, and that's the thing that stood out for me was the level of orchestration you need to do. I mean, Gary's work obviously has some amazing string stuff that requires big work, but then there's the brass and there's the organ and everything else. So I can see why you got the gig, but tell us about that audition process and how you prepared for that.
They gave me, I think, 4 songs or something. And I knew that you had to go to Nashville, which is a 13-hour drive from here to audition. And I knew it was pretty much a cold call. They were just auditioning, a bunch of people. The guy that they'd had for years was leaving. And the bass player, and this is another thing, every time you do a gig, even if it's just a jam session or whatever, you don't know who in that band is going to get you your next gig. I was with a bass player in Legends who ended up playing with Gary. And through that, I, at least got the audition. I got the audition. And then the bass player that they have now is phenomenal. But he was in Nashville, so I ended up going there and auditioning. And it took probably 2 months, I guess 3 months maybe, before I found out if I got the gig or not, because they just kept going through people and stuff. And I guess I did okay.
You sure did. And so, what was the woodshedding process like? How long did you have from when you got the nod to playing your first gig with Gary?
2 months, I think. I had what is really hard to do, and I'm sure all the guys that you talk to run into this, but you have to, if you're doing a local gig, you have your gear, and your gear, where all these sounds are, you can do this. When you go on the road, we fly every place. We don't drive. So you're renting stuff. And so I had to figure out how to get my sounds in everything, because it's a 3-keyboard gig.
That's right.
You're literally playing 3 keyboards at one time and singing. And I had to figure out how to get all my sounds to go. Well, at the time, MainStage had just come out for Apple computers. And MainStage 1 and 2 had some issues. There were many times where, Gary would just have to tell jokes because my computer would crash, it would go down. Luckily, those days don't happen much anymore. But that was the only way I could do it. Was I was lucky enough. I have a Kurzweil endorsement, so I would have a Kurzweil PC2, PC3, whatever, for the bottom keyboard, and I'd carry my patches just on a USB drive and put those in. And then the top 2 keyboards would run into MainStage. And I carried a backup. I carried 2 laptops with me, and which I'm sure all your guys do. They always carry backups of backups, But yeah, that was the learning process, was programming all the sounds. He has oboes and he has strings and French horns and flutes and stuff, and then you've of course got your strings here, your horns over here, your flute here, And then the next song you may be all different because, just the way it's set up.
And
But
that's obviously where MainStage or gig performer too. I know some people I love MainStage myself, comes into its own. So I can imagine the programming set up for that was significant. And did you have to buy? Do you tend to use any software plugins, or are you tending to use it more as a routing piece of software for those boards that you're loading sounds into?
I use Contact, and I have a bunch of different sounds. Um, I did the brass sounds, which I use. I did myself,
Yeah.
but a lot of I have thousands of dollars worth of sounds. I carry my laptops are 64 gig with 2 terabyte drives,
Wow.
and so there's a lot of stuff on there. And Gary, sometimes he'll pull out a song we haven't done in 6 months. So I don't keep everything active in MainStage because it just slows it down. So I will pull it from the drive and put it on there. It's a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And you become a programmer. I mean, that's part of the job.
And so how much of a knot does your stomach get in, Jamie, when MainStage releases an update? I mean, I play, just locally in a band, and I even get a little bit antsy when there's a MainStage update. Do you tend to be a bit conservative with that, or you tend to update? I suppose it depends whether you're touring or not.
Well, I don't update operating systems. When Apple comes out with a new OS, I will wait 6 months or longer to update, and I'll make sure that I've read everything that everybody's writing about. Don't do this, don't do that. MainStage. There used to be a time when Apple wasn't so good about legacy stuff and making sure that MainStage, back when Contact 5 was out or something like that, yeah, I had updated a couple times and just lost stuff, and had to go back. Lately, I really haven't had a problem with any of the MainStage updates. Since it hit 3.6 now, I think is where it is. I have very little problems with it at all.
No, that's great. I mean, as you mentioned, Jamie, you've been with Gary for 14 years, which is, an amazing feat on its own. So what have you learned over that time, and how has your playing developed as a result of so much extensive work with one act and all the touring that goes alongside it?
Luckily, the it's just a trio. I mean, it's Gary and keyboards, bass, and drums. The other two guys, one's in Vegas and one's in South Carolina. These guys are really amazing. The bass player was North Texas State 1 O'Clock Band. The drummer was with the Spinners and a bunch of acts. So these guys are really good at what they do. And it's once again, you rise to the level you need to be at, to do this kind of work. And not to mention, we tour with, Hermits and all these other bands. And these guys are good. Most of these guys are really good. It's usually like one or two of the originals, and then they have a string of guys who are just phenomenal players. So that's been really, really stimulating, really good. And then all of us, when we're home, do different kinds of gigs here. The bass player does jazz gigs every weekend, and the drummer sings with a show band in Vegas. I do, as I said, I'll do musicals, I'll do whatever, because we only go out a couple times a month now. So, you have time to do other stuff, and you just, I love a day, I love a week where you could do a musical and you could do a jazz gig and you could do a country gig, because Austin, Texas, you could do all these different things. It really is fulfilling as a musician to do that.
No, absolutely. And I do want to get on to the musicals too in a second. Just one probably last question. Actually, I'll get you to talk about your keyboard rig for the Gary Tour. You've covered it somewhat, but I also want to ask something a little bit left of centre, that, outfits like Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, Hermits that you mentioned, These are amazing, iconic artists from now coming up to 60 years ago. And the reality is in 10, 15, 20 years, very sadly, most of them won't be around anymore in their original iterations. Are you acutely aware of just the huge legacy these artists are leaving as you're playing alongside them, and what an end of an era that will be?
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, here I am working with people that I listened to as a kid, and like I said, Felix. Well, um, we just did a cruise with Felix and with the Zombies, Rod Argent. So here I am on a ship
Yeah.
with Felix Calveri and Rod Argent. And I'm not going to impress anybody. These guys are monster players. And so yeah, I'm lucky I've got to do this. I mean, I before Gary, I did the tour with the Funk Brothers. When the movie Standing in the Shadows of Motown came out, and I got to do some dates with them. And you're literally on stage with the guys who played "Keep Me Hanging On." I mean, the Supremes and Temptations, and the guys who played on all those records. And yeah, it's exciting. It's you look back and you go, my God, I get to do this. It's amazing.
No, it is amazing. And I apologise, Jamie, I'm not sure of the sequence, but I know you've done some work, for example, with the Platters and Archie Bell. How did that come about? Did that fall out of your work with Gary, or came prior, or in
No,
parallel?
it was prior. Yeah. A friend of mine was playing drums with Archie Bell. And once again, Archie, a lot of times the bands can't afford to have horn sections and all that. And so if you're a keyboard player and you're really good at emulating stuff like that, you can work. You can do this. And Archie was just terrific. You get to play Tighten Up every night. It was fun, and a super nice guy, and a really great singer. I mean, I don't think people realized how well he sang. But yeah, that was fun. And yeah, musicals I've gotten to do. I did the Janis Joplin musical for months. Great fun, playing Janis Joplin songs every night. And we've also we did a cruise, I guess, a couple of years ago with Big Brother.
Oh, wow.
Big Brother and the Holding Company, and to actually hear them play this stuff live was terrifically fun. We're doing another cruise in March. It's called the Flower Power Cruise, and it'll be John Kay from Steppenwolf, Moody Blues, Grassroots, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Temptations, Four Tops, a bunch of acts. Acts can stay on the ship at the same time. They sort of rotate. You like fly into Cancun and get on, and somebody gets off and stuff. But it's great fun.
No, that would be great fun. And just on the musicals, as you well and truly know, Jamie, there's a whole different discipline to playing in musicals. Tell us about, and you mentioned before about reading and needing to learn to read, just what floats your boat as far as musicals that you may not get in other sort of gigs?
A lot of times getting into it, starting it is very hard because, I was just been reading. I thought I was going to get to do one called Prom, which is a comedy, musical comedy. That hasn't happened, but you prepare. You do a lot of work preparing, and once you get it down, then you're doing the same exact show every night. For weeks or months, however long it goes. But it's great because you get it down, and then you try to perfect it. You try to get through every night without a mistake. And you might find as the show progresses, you might be able to do more than you were doing when you first started. When you're first starting it, you're holding on for dear life, and you're just trying to read what's there and get to the end without anybody yelling at you. And as it progresses, you get better and better, and you get more intricate. You learn more stuff you can do in it.
And I feel like you're playing 6 nights a week for 4 hours a night. I can't think of a better training ground for playing in a regular musical than that.
Yeah. And musicals, are an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. But you just it's great just set your stuff up, leave it, and just show up every night, and play. There's some great players, even in this town. There's some, no matter what you do, there's probably somebody who does it better. I live a few blocks from Floyd Domino, who was the keyboard player for Sleep at the Wheel, Willie, all kinds of people, and probably one of the best boogie woogie country swing players in the country. And these guys all do multiple things. I mean, he's doing weddings and he's doing everything else that we're doing and stuff. But it's great to be able to do more than one thing. You if you want to make a living at this, you should be versatile.
That's right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, aside from the musicals and your work with Gary and so on, so how do you make a daily living, Jamie? Are you doing any teaching, and then obviously playing? I assume some cover gigs. I'm interested, like for example, your gig tonight. What did that involve?
Oh, that was some friends who, like I said, they just were doing a sing along at this place I'd never been to before. But I work with some corporate bands, like everybody, wedding bands. You just do solo piano gigs for corporation stuff. I don't teach. I'm a terrible teacher. My wife is a piano teacher, and she looks at what I do and says that's wrong.
And I was going to ask you about that, Jamie, because I think you're my first guest that's married to another keyboard player / pianist. What are the upsides of that? I can imagine at least you've got someone that understands broadly what you do.
Yeah, the good side is that yes, you can talk music, and unfortunately, like I said, I was self-taught, so I do things that aren't physically correct, but I'm very fast at it, so I can pull them off, but she'll watch me play and she'll just shake her head, like that. That's you don't ever want to do that. Now, the bad thing about being married to a pianist or another musician is that I can't sneak any gear home. I can't go out and buy something and just tell her I've always had it, because she knows.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's the bad part.
That's probably a perfect segue, Jamie, to you've got this wonderful looking studio behind you. So tell us about what gear you do have, and including your work with Gary as far as what you take on stage. I know you've mentioned some of it, but just to give us a little bit of a verbal tour of what your go-to pieces of gear are.
Well, I've got I just got in fact, I got this when I was in Australia. I ordered it, K2700, the new Kurzweil.
Nice, yeah.
I've got 4 Kurzweils. I got the Kurzweil endorsement back when I did the Funk Brothers, and so I've got Kurzweil 2700. I've got a Forte, and I've got 2 PC3 K6s up right here, and then I just got the new Yamaha Montage M.
Oh wow!
Which they really sounds good. The problem I always had with Yamaha was that their organ sounds, their Leslie was just terrible, to me. And this is as good as the Nord as far as the Leslie sound goes.
Oh, there you go.
They really, really did a good job. But yeah, with Gary, like I said, it's all MainStage, it's all computers.
Yeah.
So I carry a couple of interfaces and Focusrites, and then I carry the 2 laptops. I once in a while I will take a 49 note M audio with me if they can't get something there for the top keyboard. Otherwise, I backline a PC3, like a K8 or PC3-6, and I will backline just anything for the middle that's got 76 keys. Nord, a Roland XP80, even, whatever. And then on top, I usually have a 49 note or a 61 note Axiom. And that's the way that MainStage is set up. And I don't know are you running just one keyboard off MainStage or?
Yeah, so I use 2, and I admit I'm so paranoid about the software side of things. I essentially have it set up that one keyboard is running software and the other one is essentially MIDI switching a Modi X7. into other songs. So I've got that redundancy there because I'm not backlining. I'm just relying on my own gear. So, which probably makes me interested. I mean, the K2700 is a beast of a machine, as is the Montage M. So you're just using them at home. Obviously, for gigs locally, they're a nightmare to transport, and that's not a criticism. That's just a reality of the weight of the key bed and everything else. But do you take them out?
The Montage I've been taking out. This is the 76 note, so it's
okay.
Seven. The Kurzweil weighs a ton. It really does. So I have it. I love it here in the studio. It's great, but no, it's a little heavy. I have a Forte 7 Kurzweil. I'll take that on gigs, and I'll take one of the PC 3K6s. And once again, I still take MainStage. I have that set up with the Kurzweil. It's funny because you work hard to get all your rigs sounding great, and you maybe have these wonderful keyboards in your studio. And you think, oh, I'm going to take these to the gig. Well, when it comes time to actually pack it up, you go, no. I'm just going to use what's in the garage.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. No, I think that's great. And I feel like you've already given some wonderful advice, but a common question we ask our guests is, do you have any advice for younger musicians? And you've already mentioned about, being diverse in your approach and playing lots of different things, but any other advice you give to someone trying to get established now?
Always play as much as you can. Not all the gigs are monetarily good gigs to have, but as you know, networking is part of the business. You meet other people, they meet somebody, and somebody may ask them, "Hey, I need a keyboard player for this," and they'll go, "Oh, I met this guy last week. Who wasn't terrible." There's a lot available to young guys now. Like I said, YouTube. You can look up anything on YouTube, and you can have close up of Chick Corea playing. Well, when I grew up, you bought the album and you tried to figure it out from that. So yeah, be versatile, be professional. I mean, everybody says that, but God, it is so important. My wife gives me crap because I show up so early for gigs. I show up an hour before gig because the load-in could be terrible. You could have to load in. You may not be able to take your dolly in. You may have to carry stuff, and so I always show up really early, and I prepare. If I'm playing with a band, or even just backing up a singer that I've never backed up before, I know their material. By the time I get there, I've spent a couple days just woodshedding. What they do, guys. I don't know if guys appreciate that you have to do that. Yes, you can be talented, you can go in and just play, but if you don't know their arrangement, or if you don't know how they react to certain songs, you're going to blow the gig. It's not going to happen. So.
No, that's right. No, great tips. Thank you for that. And another common question we ask is, I guess, to tag a keyboard player. So is there someone you've admired over the years that you perhaps don't know their full story in music and would love to find out more?
I was a huge George Duke fan. I got to see him twice. I saw him with actually Zappa a long time ago. In fact, you had on your show, I think I saw it when I was in Australia, you had Tom Schumann on your show.
We did, absolutely, yeah.
And I've seen him 4 or 5 times. Just phenomenal. Scary good. This is my only Tom Schumann story. Years ago, I was playing on 6th Street in Austin with a funk kind of jazz thing with this great singer. He had a voice, this huge, deep voice that would make speakers rattle. And so I'm playing at a place with him, and Spyro Gyra, early on, I didn't know them, but they were playing at a place in Austin. And so I'm playing the gig, and I look up and I see Tom Schumann at the bar. And I go, oh, shit, I'm not going to impress this guy. And so in between songs, I go over to the bar and I say, Tom, would you like to come sit in? And super nice guy, just super cordial, says, yeah, love to. So I think I just had my little Kurzweil PC3, or what was the predecessor to 3K6. I can't remember, V200 or something, V2. And I had that on stage. And Toby was going to do Shaky Ground, and so I pulled up, he said, yeah, just give me a clavinet sound. So I pulled up a clavinet sound. And Toby looks over at me and he goes, no, man, this isn't cool. I don't want somebody sitting in. And I go, no, this is fine. Trust me, this is going to be okay. And, Tom does this clavinet solo from hell, just phenomenal. And Toby looks over at me and he's going, who is this? What is this? And I said, Spyro Gyro. And
that's a great story.
Only time I ever met him, but yeah, he was just a sweetheart of a guy.
He is, and just amazing talent. I do hope he's enjoying retirement. I hope you're enjoying retirement in, I think it was Portugal or Spain. So,
yeah, Chris took over for him. Chris Feitcher,
yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And another great keyboard player,
Absolutely. No, some great picks there, Jamie. Much appreciated. And then we have the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. So 5 albums, if you could only take 5 to a desert island, what would they be?
I could give you artist. First of all, George Duke. I would take anything by George Duke. Herbie Hancock, I've never got to see live, but, Headhunters was life-changing for a lot of musicians. Bruce Hornsby. I love Bruce Hornsby.
Yeah.
People don't give him the credit.
No.
That the guy's got McCoy Tyner kind of chops,
yes.
But he plays commercial music. Todd Rundgren. I loved Todd Rundgren's stuff. I don't know if you ever listened to that. But yeah.
No, you've done well. You're quicker than most. That's brilliant. No, great stuff. And then our final 10-part, what we call the quick fire 10. So 10 short and sharp questions that we'd love your responses on. So first album you ever heard, if you can recall?
Meet the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I had Fragile, yes.
Yes. Love, brilliant album. Most important pre-gig ritual. So let's assume Gary Puckett. What do you do before a gig to make sure everything's firm in your mind before you go on stage?
Well, I mean, that gig I've been doing so long that there's very few things that if gear fails, that of course gets your attention. We've played a few places that I have freaked out a little bit. We played Wembley,
Oh wow!
And with us and the Righteous Brothers, it was. You think I'm at Wembley. I've set up with Paul McCartney sets up. This is like, and you freak out a little bit at those kind of things.
No, that's good. So not a set ritual. And you've just reminded me, I'm going to segue before we finish the rest of those 10, Jamie, into any great train wreck stories. So no matter what the artist, have you had something go spectacularly wrong for you at a gig that's, you can look back on now and laugh about?
Yeah, I've had, which I'm sure a lot of guys have had. I've had keyboards just fall. The stand breaks and all of a sudden 88 note keyboards crashing down.
It wasn't an X stand, was it, Jamie?
It was a what do they call ultimate support stand? Yes.
Oh wow! Okay.
And we were in New York playing at oh gosh, what was it? I remember the place has a revolving stage, and it was multiple acts, and it was us and I think it was the Hermits and the Box Tops, and we were the second act, and I played and. As soon as I finished, backline came over to take stuff off and move it off stage. And I told the backline guy, I said, take the bottom keyboard first because apex stands tend to tip forward, and he didn't. He took off the top keyboards first. I mean, he took off the top one, and it just, the whole thing just came forward.
Wow. So back to those questions, your favourite size performance venue, and you've played them all. So, everything from a theatre through to arenas. What's your favourite style that you really do like the most?
I like the smaller rooms. I like the 200 seat rooms, those kind of things, especially with Gary because he tells stories. And if it's an intimate situation, people get to enjoy it like they're sitting in his living room. He's a very personable guy and just he's great at telling stories and stuff like that.
No, absolutely. Transpose button or adjust on the fly?
Good question. I do a lot of gigs where singers will hand you a chart, and I'm sure you've had this happen. They'll hand you a chart and they'll go, "But I don't do it in this key." And you go, "Why are you giving me this chart then?" And so I, especially if I'm doing strings and horns, I will hit the transpose button and read the chart.
Gotcha.
Just because I am not a genius that can transpose horns and strings and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do think that's a useful thing, but that would be the only time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, no, absolutely. If it's possible, favorite gig you've ever played?
I played the White House twice. That was pretty intense.
I do want to go back to that, Jamie. That's a great point. So I believe you played a congressional dinner, and there were two other occasions. So tell us a little bit about the process of doing one of those. I can imagine that's a whole different sort of gig.
Yeah, I mean, you've got security and you've got snipers on the roof and stuff as you go in. It's a little intense. The White House, we played the congressional dinner twice, or congressional ball. It's Christmas time, and did that twice. It was, it's amazing. You're basically a guest of the President of the United States. It's pretty cool. Wembley, on the other hand, was mind-boggling. It was just to be there. Being in London, I had never been to London before, so that was great. Yeah, I would definitely say the White House is probably the top one.
Yeah, that would stand out for sure. And subsequent to that, is the favorite city you've ever played? I know you mentioned Tokyo with fondness. I mean, that could be it, but favorite city?
I love Melbourne.
There you go. You charmer.
No, we've played there 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
It is a lot like Austin. It's got the river running through the middle and the bridges, and it's beautiful.
It is.
People are really nice, and nothing bit me there. So
no, that's right. You're fairly safe in Melbourne. That's right. Name an artist you've not worked with that you'd like to work with one day if the opportunity arose.
We used to tour a lot with B.J. Thomas. Who was just terrific. And I never got to back him up at all. But his band was terrific anyways. Mm. But yeah, I miss him. I can't think of anybody that
that's okay.
Haven't had the chance to play with.
No. And BJ Thomas is very much worth the mention. Yes, he was an icon as well. Favorite music documentary or movie? Do you have one over the years that you go back to and have a watch?
Oh yeah, Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap. Yeah, great. I think you're the first person to mention that. Great pick. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember.
I think they're doing have I read correctly in recent months? I think they're doing a follow-up.
They are. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so no, that's great. Great pick.
Every musician knows those lines by heart. So.
Yes. Name one thing you'd like to see invented as a keyboard player that would make your life easier.
Lighter keyboards, basically.
Yeah.
I love the Kurzweil stuff, but it's heavy.
Yeah.
As you know, there are a lot of times where multiple acts are playing, and you have to move stuff and get it off, and yeah, you want more horsepower and less weight, basically.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like an open letter is warranted to the manufacturers. I would buy a Montage M tomorrow, Jamie, except I refuse to carry it. So, last one, favourite non-musical activity or hobby? What keeps you sane outside of music?
I've had motorcycles all my life. I finally just sold one, my last one here recently, but I've loved motorcycles. Luckily, I've never crashed one, so I've been lucky. But yeah, that would be it.
No, I'm very glad you haven't crashed them, because we wouldn't have had you here today. And you've obviously had and are continuing to have a stellar musical career, Jamie. We can't thank you enough for your time, and particularly, as I said, after a gig. No matter what gig it is, it's hard to come down off that and then jump into an interview. So we hugely appreciate it, and hopefully we'll catch up with you when you're next down in Australia.
And you'll have to come out and hang out with us. Yeah.
Would love to. And there we have it. Yeah, look, I got so much out of that interview with Jamie. The thing that stood out to me, and it's something we talk about during the show, is that pure discipline of doing 6 gigs a week for up to 4 hours per night. It's something that we've obviously lost in the modern music industry, but just what an amazing breeding ground for all the talent that is still kicking goals today. And Jamie's obviously an example of that. So alongside all his other insights, we hugely appreciate his time. And I always appreciate your time too, listening to these interviews. It does make a huge difference. And we can't do it also without our gold and silver supporters. So a shout out to Brother Paul Brown from the Waterboys. Hope you're getting a break over the festive season, Brother Paul. We're also hugely indebted to the musicplayer.com forums, particularly the Keyboard Corner. Do jump in there if you'd like some good chat with like-minded people of the keyboard variety. Also a shout out to the wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew, who is a long-time supporter of the podcast. Thank you so much, Tammy, as always. And last but definitely not least, Midnight Mastering. So if you are creating your own work and want a really good job as far as mixing and mastering, I cannot recommend Mike from Midnight Mastering highly enough, and also incredibly reasonably priced. So midnightmastering.com. Again, thank you for your time. We'll be back again in a week or two. And in the meantime, keep on playing.